And now is the most exciting moment in most of our lives, I think. And it is Dr. Beck who is going to start.
Well, this is a very exciting moment for me, and I am honored to be able to chat with one of the great world leaders of all time. Goes back for a long time. And secondly, I really treasure the opportunity to discuss the cognitive approach to people's problems with you.
A great honor having this meeting with senior, respected, or say, I think, experienced scholar. As I think Tibetan tradition or perhaps I think in the monastery, the seniority, younger one, elder one, there is, I think, strong sort of tradition. The younger one must respect to an elder. Although I myself now belonging to the elder one, because now over 70, but comparatively, here I'm younger.
So you want to start with negative thoughts?
I think modern scientists who are dealing with mind, and there should be many similarities because I think Buddhist system is not just a prayer or a devotion, but usually we call analytical meditation. Analytical, that means analyze. Now analyze about external events. Then external events, I think many events actually human creation. So then as far as human movement is concerned, the ultimate sort of factor is motivation. So first start here, or I think combine here and here, then some actions, verbal action, physical action, or mental action. That then makes differences, external things. So the Buddhist tradition, whenever a problem or thing which we do not want, actually we want to overcome, then just prayer won't work. Just sitting meditation won't work. We must analyze the sources of these problems. Then ultimately go to mind. Then the mind become important. Therefore, some people describe Buddhism is as the science of mind. I think it is true. The Buddhist way of approach is the using mind, or I think, using validated mind, right? Valid mind, and then transform our emotion. Usually, those emotions which beneficial to oneself as well as other is validated, right? Valid. Because, you see, we want happiness, we want satisfaction, we want peace. So those mental elements which ultimately bring peace, happiness, satisfaction, that's validated. Then those negative or harmful emotions such as hatred, anger, these not only destroy one's own peace of mind, but also creates some negative or unhappy atmosphere. So creates more sort of pain or more suffering, oneself as well as other. So these are not valid. So now they utilize positive emotion as a countermeasure for negative emotion. So that's the way to transform our emotion. Transformation of emotion, not through drug or not through injection, but through utilize our own mind. So therefore, in Buddhism, like many other ancient Indian non-Buddhist tradition, the very detailed sort of explanation about the world of mind, vast subject. There are so many different sort of categories of minds or thoughts and emotions, and also the different level, grosser level, more subtle, like this moment we are using the grosser level of mind. When we are dreaming, another more subtler level of mind. Then deep sleep without dream, another level of mental sort of state. So naturally, modern science dealing about emotion or mind, also is trying to seek the reality. I think the long history of Buddhism or some of the ancient sort of thought, ancient tradition, also now investigate, try to find the reality of mind or mental world. So there are many similarities.
Yes.
And according to my own experience, now more than, I think, 16, 17 years, now I have a meeting or dialogue with scientists, mainly 4 fields: cosmology, neurobiology, physics, like subatomic physics, like quantum physics, then psychology. These 4 fields, these 4 fields are common grounds. The Buddhist literature also a lot of explanation or discussion about these 4 fields. Like cosmology, some of the Buddhist literature, some of the description of Buddhist literature now seems outdated. Modern scientific finding is much more reliable, much more sort of subtler. So, in Buddhism, in particularly the Sanskrit tradition, sometimes people call Mahayana tradition. Now there, one Buddha's own sort of quotation, it stated, roughly speaking, my follower should not accept my teaching out of devotion or faith or respect, but rather investigation or experiment. So therefore, we have some kind of liberty to investigate even Buddha's own word. Therefore, now we have liberty, to say some of the literature which describing about world geography and also the size of stars and moon and sun and distance from Earth to these planets or stars, or some of the description are disgrace. So that's I think, in a way, a little strange, but in a way, I think that's greatness of the Buddhist sort of way of thinking. Investigate, not sort of the blind faith, investigate.
Right.
Therefore, now, me as a Buddhist, as a result of meeting with scientists, we learned many useful things from scientific finding. And we need some modification, some of our ancient sort of belief or ancient sort of concept. Then the psychology field, I think Buddhist psychology seems to say more advanced. But still, I don't know. You have to judge. So, according to some of my sort of conversation with the modern psychologists, it seems Buddhist sort of tradition more systematic and more detailed explanation. So therefore, modern scientists find some usefulness about Buddhist explanation, about minds or thoughts, emotions, and particularly the method or way to transform the mind or emotion. So, no doubt there are similarities, many similarities, like that.
Now, Your Holiness, I have a suggestion.
Actually, I saw one book, your book, Prisoner of Hate. I think that's almost like Buddhist literature.
Well, I think the book is about 1,500 years late. Now, we analyze hate in a very special way, or anger, just to start with anger, which is earlier than hate. So if one of my colleagues says something, and I think maybe he is putting me down, he is insulting me, I get that thought, he is not showing me respect. So that's the thought. And then I feel I have been wronged by him. So it's very important in anger. I have been wronged. He's done me wrong. That's my wrong thinking, but I think that he has done me wrong. And then I think I am the victim. He has made me into a victim. And then I get angry. And then I want to punish him. But I have learned from experience, now this is personal experience rather than science, that 90% of the time I'm wrong. So that's the negative thinking comes in. So then I start to analyze, and I think, is there some explanation as to why he said what he said? Maybe he doesn't feel well. Maybe I didn't hear him right. Maybe what he says is correct. So then I stop to think about this. And when I think about it, my anger goes away. Or I may feel that maybe he's in some pain himself. And then that's with compassion. So I think he wouldn't have said that to me unless something was really hurting him. And so I think if something's hurting him, then I understand. And as soon as I get understanding, I no longer feel angry. The anger goes way out there. Does that fit with?
I think that's almost same. I think the Buddhist way of thinking or way of approach to these negative emotion. Negative emotion. I think firstly, what is the demarcation, negative and positive? Now, I think firstly, there's no absolute negative and positive. That's from Buddhist viewpoint. Now, things are relative. Things are, what's it? It's only
from a relative. It's only from a relative point of view that we can talk about what is positive and what is negative, without making a comparison. There is nothing that is good in terms of it is absolute entity.
Then I think ultimately, by nature, we have the cognitive sort of experience, and with cognitive, we have the experience of feeling.
Right.
So through that way, feeling of pain, feeling of joyfulness or pleasure, there. So by nature, including animals, if you want happiness or joyfulness, and do not want pains. So since we want happiness or satisfaction or hope, we do not want suffering or pain. Therefore, those things which causing pains or suffering, including suffering and pain itself, is negative.
Right.
Those things which ultimately bring happiness, joyfulness, satisfaction, that is positive.
Right.
Now, in the terms of emotion, those emotions which some emotion may bring temporary satisfaction, but long run more harmful. So now here, temporary and long term, between these two, long term is more important, because its effect is more serious, or consequences are more serious than the short term. So now those emotions which not only temporarily but also long run bring benefit, then that's of course positive. But some temporarily may feel some satisfaction, but long run harmful, that is negative. So someone temporarily a little sort of uneasiness, but long run beneficial. That is positive. So now question, like afflicted emotion, such as anger or hatred. Now these, now for example, when I lose temper, angry to someone, then at that moment I use some harsh word or even my eye like that. Then sometimes I may get some satisfaction. Oh, now I done something like or responded. But then when
I won't like it.
then after some time, the anger cooled down. Then I really feel shy. Oh, I already, done something wrong. So that means the anger, although it brings some kind of temporary satisfaction, but long run, shameful, uncomfortable. Why these things happen? As exactly you mentioned, all these negative emotion, when the emotion fully develop, then you can't see the reality. It's a much sort of mental projection. Although there must be sometimes any sort of the basis, but sometimes there may be some basis, whether bad or good. But then the moment negative emotion develop, then exaggeration, right? Exaggeration about the good or bad. I mean, here is good means there's something beautiful, something good. Then attachment. That also negative emotion. So exaggerated the positiveness of this object. Then negative ugliness or something you do not want, some kind of rejection, pushing, rejection. That's hatred or anger. So there may be some basis, but then again through mental projection, exaggerated, then 100% negative. Then anger fully developed, or hatred, rejection. The other, there is maybe some basis, some good thing, but then still mental projection, some 100% good, then attachment. So both attachment something
That brings people together.
or to come to nearer the object, closer, the anger, distance, rejection, repulsion. Both are essentially misconception, right? Misconception, not the realistic. So mental projection or exaggeration. So as you mentioned, the 90% or 100% sort of exaggerated. So then I think you mentioned, I think, a very important point. That is, usually these negative emotions develop. Then whole self or whole mind become like one body.
Almost like embodiment.
Embodiment. I think that's why till all these disaster things you see happen, we do not know, sometimes we do not know. So now here important is through some training, I think, then eventually we have the ability, when these negative emotions develop, then try to separate yourself. Then like yourself like watcher, right? Observer. And then observe the negative emotion, such as anger. Some occasion, I myself, if some anger comes, oh, then you see, try to see, try to separate myself. Can see the anger. Then sometimes bit sort of strong anger comes. Even something warming here. Oh, then I can feel, oh, that is the anger sort of kasoda. Oh, blessing, anger's blessing. As soon as seeing the ugliness of the anger, same time, anger still there, but you yourself you separate it, and then look the anger. Then anger automatically, the intensity of anger goes down.
We have a word for the separation from anger, and we use an interesting word. We use the word distance. You try to put it at a distance from you. So that's another point of similarity. The other point of similarity is what you talked about, attachment, because we're talking about too much attachment. And we see that not only with people, we get too attached, too dependent on people, and then we lose our own freedom. But we also become too attached, dependent, addicted to drugs and to success and to material things. And those don't bring us happiness, do they? They may be momentary pleasure, but then we still want more. And we find that people put their attention on these kind of worldly things, fame and fortune, money, and so on. And once they keep thinking about it, they're never satisfied, because as soon as they get it, they still want more and more and more. So they don't have, some of the unhappiest people that I have known have had the most money and the most success and sometimes the most fame, and then they're not happy. Pleasure, yes, they get momentary pleasure, but long-range contentment, happiness, not at all. This is interesting.
That's true.
Yeah.
The Buddhist literature says the discontentment is one kind of suffering. Discontented. Right. Then the person who have discontent, that always feels always something wrong. Never get satisfaction. Always want more, want. 저자가 척심명의 못하고 울부들이 있어야 돼.
So it is said in Buddhism that those who are discontented, they are the real poor people. They are suffering from poverty.
So never get satisfaction. So the opposite is contentment. You have contentment, then in reality or mental level, you are really rich. I have everything. That kind of contentment. Then you really have the complete sort of satisfaction. Then also, the discontentment leads, you see, the unnecessary effort, or sometimes impossible effort. So the discontentment, eventually too much expectation, too much sort of effort, attempt, then most cases failure or find more obstacle. So then more anger, more worry. And also I think discontentment also brings the jealousy. Someone contented. Meantime, someone else have all these facility and feel very good. But you see, because of the discontent, you want more and more. Then your neighbor gets something good. Then you feel jealousy. So the discontentment brings more, negative emotion. As a result, they eventually lose peace of mind. And sometimes even suicide also take place, isn't it?
Now, Your Holiness, you mentioned pain and suffering, and we make a distinction between pain and suffering in this way, that if a person has pain, say pain in the joints, in the arm, legs, like they get from arthritis, they can suffer all the time because they think about it. They think their attention goes to their arms or legs, and they think, why me? Why has fate chosen me? This is terrible. I can never have an enjoyable life. I have no control over my life. I'm just doomed. And there have been scientific studies that show that people who have some kind of medical disability, who have thoughts like that, suffer much, much more than people who have positive thoughts. Some people who have positive thoughts will think, oh, well, this gives me greater perspective. I now can see things from a different point of view. Things that seemed so important to me before are not so important. The pain that I have may be bringing me closer to my family, and the pain will then lead me maybe to do things that I never did before. Those people have minimal suffering. Now, you used the word separation before. There have been some studies done in London, England, where they show that people who are able to separate themselves, who do not see the pain as part of them, suffer much less than those who actually see the pain as me. So some person will say, my back aches, and they feel great suffering. Others will just say, it aches, like it, meaning something separate from themselves.
I see, no?
And they don't suffer as much. So it's interesting how just the separation, the distancing, as we say, can actually reduce suffering.
I see. This is new. I will try. Sometimes some itching. Usually I got, trouble here. Always some trouble. Now more than 50 years, always itching like that. So I will try to, there, not on mine, but something else, I don't know. But Buddhists, I think not necessarily now, I think Buddhists, I think if we think according to common sense, now, you see, some negative things happen, including physical pain or some tragic sort of experience, or lost one of your dear family, dear friends, or things like that, or a lot of criticism. Unjust criticism, or baseless criticism, something like that. Then it is very helpful, you see, to look you see, these negative things which causing your anger or sadness or something. Then to these things, look from wider perspective. That really makes big differences. Some unfortunate things happen. Then if you look closely or narrowly, then that unfortunate thing now appears something huge, immense. The more that kind of impression, then more unhappiness. But if you look at from wider perspective, yes, that's one unfortunate, but still, you see, the vast world, or there are sort of many events. Now, I think one Buddhist literature mentioned that if you come across some criticism, then think, oh, you also have some from some people praising on you. So, if you just look the criticism, more anger or more unpleasant. But at the same time, oh, okay, doesn't matter, some people praising me. But then, mental level, now more balanced. Yes, now this is someone saying bad to me. But doesn't matter, there are people who are praising me, okay. Then there's someone towards the praising, too much attachment or pride. About that come. Then think, oh, there are some people now criticizing me, so this is just part. So you see, so they more looking broadly. So now, I think often, you see, people ask me, with reason now, like some people used to ask me, world becoming degenerate or declining. Because of reason, you see, A, B, C, D like that. Then usually I responded, and I truly feel, yes, the certain events, now for example, the Iraq or terrorism or these sort of, yes, obviously there are many sad things there. But if you look overall, then at least during 50s, 60s, then two blocks with nuclear weapon, they're ready to shoot each other, then the whole group in the state of danger. Now today, I think the desire for peace, the spirit of against violence now so big, isn't it? Yeah. So if you look from broader perspective, then today's world is much better than the mid previous centuries, 1950s or 60s, like that. So important is look more holistic way. That's, I think, very, very important, very useful. So that, as I mentioned before, things are relative. So if you look holistic view, then you can see all these positive, negative, positive, negative. If just focusing one negative, then your mind becoming more worry, more sort of more unhappiness.
So, Your Holiness, it's a question as to where we focus our attention. Now, people who get depressed said that they see the glass of water, say, as half empty. Somebody else sees the glass, could be milk or wine, they see it as half full. So it's a question as to where you focus your attention, largely. If you focus it on the negative, that's all you're going to see. If you focus on the positive, you'll see much more positive. Now, we also believe that much of this type of negative thinking, negative thoughts, actually comes from a self-centeredness. That people, the word we use is egoism or egocentricity. And so the more they focus on their self, it could be their pain, it could be the attachment, it could be other people's criticism. The more they focus on that, actually, the worse they feel. But if they can get away from focusing on me, my pain, my desires, my attachments, and we see ourselves just as part of the whole human structure. Now, where I think it comes into bigger problems that I wanted to mention to you has to do with what we call group egoism. When we then extend our own ego to the whole group, and we start to think the group is right, just as I would think I am right, now I think my whole group is right. As soon as I think my whole group is right, then it means the other group is wrong, and we're better than them, and they're worse than us. And if there's any conflict at all, then we see ourselves even more so as all good and all right, and they're all bad. And pretty soon we start to dehumanize them. They're not real anymore. They just become like robots, and then they become demons. And once they're demons, you know what we have to do to them. And so it seems to me that's a major problem in the world, stemming from the self-centeredness that each individual has, but then extends that self-centeredness or egoism to his entire ethnic group or political group or racial group. I was wondering what you thought of that formulation.
I think this is, quite complicated. I think firstly, the eco, I think there are usually, of course, firstly, you see, my understanding about the English word is not very profound. It's not, may not be very correct by understanding about the English word. And when I explain to other without a proper translator, then within my own limited vocabulary, you see, I use certain words. So now the feeling or the concept of I, self. The self is there. Although now a lot of discussions, what is self? Through the last 3,000 years, there's a lot of discussions.
We don't know yet.
So that's, I think, something different. But here now, the self is there. Now also the self is the center of the whole universe. That's also fact. The things are designated from the Buddhist viewpoint. So who designate? I, self. Like east, west, north, or south. From where?
From where it is, these directions are counted. It is from point of view of the person.
No absolute east or west or north and south. So must be compare.
Through comparison.
True comparison. So therefore, the self is the center of the whole universe. Self is there and important. And also it is basic right to gain something good for the self. But now, again, I think the illusion or misconception. I think particularly, when we were young, although the self, feeling of self, importance of self is there, but then the reality is very obvious. The maximum benefit to self, you depend on someone else's care. So you appreciate very much about others' affection. Now we grown up, we feel independent. My exist, not depend on other. Then furthermore, misconception. Then I'm superior. I can bully. I can exploit on other. no longer any respect other. That's now misconception lead that much sort of radical sort of
State.
the self-state.
Radical state of the self.
Radical state. I think the self go extreme. Now, I think without forgetting self, but self, according to reality, self, now here, human self, is part of humanity. Then furthermore, human being is a social animal. Therefore, no matter one single human being, very powerful, very smart, and very intelligent, but without other human companion, very difficult to survive.
Lonely.
Isn't it? Yes. And also is there, without any human being, just oneself. Even you see in big cities, a lot of human beings there, but mentally feeling of loneliness is also suffering, isn't it?
Yes.
And then actually, without any human brothers, sisters, just a single one person remain there, I think will die very soon. That's very clear. So therefore, since we human self is a part of humanity, the humanity is social animal, therefore interest or benefit to oneself entirely depend on other. So my success, my future depend on them. So in order to have better future, successful life, I have to take care about others' right. So now, without forgetting importance of self, but importance of self's future depend on other self. Therefore, other self also equally important as important oneself. So the egoistic, egoism, feeling of self itself, not necessarily sort of wrong, but feeling of self go extreme, then of course it bring a lot of disaster. So now similarly, self in the center of the universe, then world or your neighbor, my neighbor, friendship, sense of caring. Then my town, friendship, respect, regarding part of myself, part of myself. Then my nation, then humanity, my continent, or my world, my planet. I think not necessarily go wrong, isn't it? Okay. So mind, positive way, whole universe is considered part of mind. So taking care. But if you make a distinction, we and the they, then they something, nothing to do with our own fortune or future. Then these are, I think, wrong things. That's why I always telling people, the very concept of war, although they're part of human history, but in ancient time, each community or each country more or less independent, self-sufficient, not dependent on the neighbor. So under that circumstances, the concept of war comes. Destruction of your neighbor as an enemy, that's the victory of yourself. But now today, no longer that reality. All neighbors are part of yourself. So destruction of your neighbor is destruction of yourself. So the concept is one side victory, other side defeat. That's unrealistic. So therefore, the entire world, entire humanity because the bronze, our, we, like that. So that's usually my way of approach.
That's good.
Whether it is wrong or right, please tell me.
I think you're on the right track. But because I'd like to add one more thing. That is, when we think of somebody as being opposite, against us, we actually get a mental image. People don't realize that till we ask them, but we do in therapy. And it turns out that when they are angry at somebody else, they actually have an image of that person.
Yes.
Sometimes see this person as an ape, or
Yes.
and sometimes with horns. Like and so we see that from one individual to another individual, but it's also between countries, nations, ethnic groups. They tend to have kind of an image, a mental image
Yes.
of the other people as some way subhuman, even though that's not bad if we think all life is precious. But they see them in a really negative way. And much of the word propaganda, they would have pictures. Let's say when the Germans would have pictures of the Russians, and they would show during World War II, they'd show the Russians as looking like beasts, wild beasts. Then, of course, the people felt it's okay to shoot wild beasts because they're not human beings anymore. So, but we also think in terms of positive imagery. And we see people who, let's say, have a fear of other people. Sometimes there was an example of a student, a youngster who was going to go to school, and he had a picture in his mind of all of the other students looking at him, and they were very big, and he was very small in this image. And so what we did is we had him picture himself as Superman. He had an image of himself as Superman. As soon as he had an image of himself as Superman, he saw the other students as small, and he was big, and he was able to go to school. So just I wanted to add that little bit about the images are very important.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think all those negative emotions. Now, for example, I think two main negative emotions: attachment, hatred. This both the the Lord Shine you are you don't want to do such Lord Shani tell you chapati. You don't want the meet using money, you don't want Jimbaina. Tamjaro, you don't want already, chickly, you don't want, chickly, you don't want to do. So, didn't the Karsungo Slavina, Kansa Chedam or Ranila, and you don't want the child imagination side little image.
Your point is very valid in terms of how you imagine things. Let us take the example of two strong negative emotions like hatred and attachment. In the case when we develop attachment, we tend to see that object as something attractive, pleasing, and close to your heart. Now the key question is whether that attractiveness that you see in the object is there in the object itself, or is it something that you imagined? If it is something there in the object, then everybody who looks at the object should be able to see that object as pleasing, as wonderful, as attractive. But this is normally not the case. It is only you who are seeing that object as something special and attractive. So this clearly shows that this is what you have exaggerated, what you have imagined.
So that's not objective. Actually, you see, mental projection. So, through mental projection, creates some kind of beautiful image in our mind. So then attachment develop. So similarly, anger comes the negative image, actually mental projection.
And actually, what we find is that when we get a negative image of somebody else and it stays on and on, we start to attack the other person, but actually we're attacking the image. We're not attacking, in our own mind, we think we're attacking a real person, if I can explain this. By attacking this image of the person, we're actually injuring a person who may be nothing like the image. So the more we have the negative image of the person, the more we're going to attack him, but it's always the image that we're having that is bothering us, not the real person. So we talked about delusion before. In a way,
Yes.
a lot of hatred is based on a delusion. And the delusion can be based on a real image, like we see each other right now.
Absolutely. Very right.
Yeah.
So I think the Buddhist concept, all these negative sort of emotions based on ignorance or misconception. So the appearance is actually not the reality. There's always big gap, appearance and reality. So then, due to one's own sort of the mind, then exaggerated, the appearance furthermore exaggerated. So certain kind of image then come. Then anger, attachment, these things happen. So actually, deeply rooted on misconception.
Yeah.
So all these the negative the events on this planet now today, I think many of these misfortune or these sort of the unfortunate sort of events, ultimately due to the wrong image and group or individual's mind. So then, according to their own imagination, or on the basis of their image, then carried some decisions, some actions like that.
Now, Your Holiness, if we just depart for one moment, you mentioned about the broad perspective before, and I think much of the unhappiness that individuals have is because they lose perspective. And I thought I'd give you an example. There was some time ago, I was asked to consult about a professor of physics, and he thought that he had made a very great discovery which might give him the Nobel Prize. And he got passed over. He did not get the Nobel Prize, and so he was depressed. And so I said, well, how important part of your life was this prize? And he said, 100%. So I asked him, I said, do you have a family? And he said, oh, yes. And I said, well, how important is your family to you? And so he said, well, my wife, 20%. So I said, then that's 80% now for the prize. And I said, do you have children? And he said, yes, I have 3 children. And I said, how important are they to you? And he said, oh, I guess they're about 40%. So we're beginning to get around. And I said, do you get to see your children very much? He said, well, no, I've had so much time working on my physics project that I really haven't spent much time with them. And I said, how do you feel about that? And then he started to weep. And I said, why are you weeping? He says, it reminded me when I was growing up, that's just the way my father was to me. And he said, now I suddenly realize what I am missing out on. My father missed out on it, I'm missing out, and of course my children are missing out. So I said, now how important are your children to you now? And he said 80%. and I said, well, where does that leave your wife? Anyhow, he left the office, and he wasn't depressed anymore.
Oh. 정말 노벨 프라이즈 100% 되셨는데 이것도 소 차십단지 상당히 제공으로 제용돼. Yeah, very wise. I think right method. Good method. That we call exactly analytical meditation.
Oh, really?
Yes. So you, now this case, second person, right? Second person utilize analytical meditation, then make clear to that person. Then all his sort of emotion which based on misconception, then changed.
Yeah, just like that.
So that's wonderful.
That's amazing.
Very good.
So how long have you known about analytical?
So you should get the Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, what is that?
Someone.
You should get the
Because you see, because someone depressed due to Kasoda lost the opportunity of receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, but you helped, you see, his sort of new life, isn't it?
That's right.
So that's great work.
Thank you. And so we can do the same thing with pain, too. We see how important the pain is, and then we look at the other things in their life which they had given up on, and they realize they can still get much satisfaction and pleasure, but they forgot about that because they're so preoccupied. Attention is all on the pain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very right. Very right.
So that's all analytical meditation. How long have they been doing analytical meditation?
Kajosa.
When did they discover analytical meditation? 2,500 years ago?
Oh, no. I think the Buddhists, even before Buddhism, you see, this analytical meditation already there. But that's, nothing special, but I think utilize human intelligence properly.
Well, we discovered it 40 years ago.
So I think human intelligence.
Yeah.
Now, actually, the purpose of education, I believe the narrowing the gap, reality and appearances. Through education, proper education, then this gap, appearance and reality reduce. So whether good or bad, it is very important to deal with realistically. Then much easier to overcome the problem. Then thing which you want can achieve. But we often, our action, I think, based on appearances, not the reality. And particularly now today, I feel the world much changed. I think firstly, due to population and the economy and the environmental issue and many new development. Due to these new development, now the reality much changed. New reality. But our human thinking or conception are still the old pattern. So I think some of our activities, I think, may not go well with the new reality. So that's why sometimes I think unnecessary problems happen. So therefore now analytical meditation means analyze the reality, then accordingly act. I think another thing, I believe, like external matters, our internal, our mind world, or particularly in emotional world, is by nature, they're always, contradictory things, always there. So without contradiction, or without contradictory forces, then we cannot change. But because of the contradictory force, if something bad for us, then try to find the opposite force. Then try to increase that, then this will reduce. The opposite, because the thing which you do not want, not just go away, but we have to find the opposite sort of force. So similarly, in our emotion, anger, even though we realize anger is bad, although there still is some kind of impact, but anger will not go easily. So we have to try, we have to find out the opposite force, or counter force of anger. Now that is loving kindness. So the more loving kindness force increase, the anger reduce. So similarly, ignorance and awareness, two opposite. More awareness come, the ignorance reduce. So the analytical meditation means they try to know the reality. So bring awareness. That reduce the misconception.
When you use the word contradictory force, we use the word contradiction quite a bit in our treatment, because somebody will come in and, let's say I went to a social event, maybe a conference, and say, I guess nobody likes me because nobody talked to me. So we would say, okay, what's the evidence? And they said, well, I was in a big room and nobody came over to say hello. So then I'll say, well, is there any contradictory evidence, anything else that happened? And they say, oh yes, I guess on the way in somebody did talk to me, but I forgot about that. And then I said, well, how about earlier? He said, yeah, I guess when I was at the bar having a drink, somebody talked to me. So as soon as they bring in the contradictory evidence, so it's very important, then the conclusion goes away. They come back to reality, right?
That's right.
So that's why the contradictory force is so really important. Otherwise, people will come to a conclusion and then they'll look for evidence that supports the conclusion. But you got to teach them how to contradict their conclusion. You have to teach them how to find contradictory evidence. That's education too. Much of our therapy is just education. I guess the big question though is, how do you educate the mass of the world to do that?
Now, of course, I think in modern education, so my view, since several years, is that it seems in modern education, the sufficient sort of pay attention way. I think sufficient pay attention about brain development, knowledge, but not equally, not equal attention has been paid about the warm-heartedness or this. I believe, I think almost 1,000 years ago, in the European continent, the separate education institution started. And at that time, I think as far as moral ethics is concerned, the church take the full responsibility, and also family. Now time passes. So at that time, the separate, newly developed education institution, then their only responsibility is education, brain development. Now time passes, the influence of church, sometimes you see little decline, and family also sometimes you see the family value, also sometimes little difficulties. So then the newly developed education institution only take care about brain development. Then eventually nobody pay attention or take care about the moral ethics side. So the modern education seems not completed. Now, then again, there are two views. This is some opinion. One view is moral ethics must be based on religious faith. Then the moral ethics now a bit narrowed. But another view, another opinion, moral ethics can be taught or can be sustained through our awareness, through our analytical meditation. Even, I think, with help of scientific finding, as your sort of experiment, without involve religious faith. So that usually I call secular ethics. But secular here, according Mahatma Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, secular means not a rejection of religion, respect not only one religion, but all religions respect. And also no discrimination, whether believer or non-believer. So that's the spirit of secular. So irrespective whether believer or non-believer, you see, they make clear the importance of ethics, moral ethics. So otherwise, the education system, more secular basis, then once you see moral ethics, if moral ethics involve religious faith, then they, according to the principle of secular education, then sometimes there's difficulties, conflict. So I feel, I don't know whether it's correct or not, I don't know, but I feel that we need the secular way to approach, the moral ethics. So that I think can promote with scientific sort of finding and your own experience like that. I mean, with help of these findings, then I think we should have some more program in education from the kindergarten. And now here, I think the best response to conflict is dialogue, not violence, not showing force. But because the other also part of me, part of we, therefore have to solve through human way, not violent way. So the promotion of peace, with that promotion of dialogue, I think promotion of spirit of dialogue, I think must go together. So one way in education field. Then media people. I think usually the media, I think again, now a bit too long, okay. 2 minutes, no. Now, then it's my fundamental sort of belief. No, I want to seek your sort of your view. My fundamental belief is the human nature is more gentleness, right? Human nature is gentleness, because the way we come from mother's womb, and then entirely depend on mother's milk. So that means our life began within the human affection, human compassion. So
agree.
without that, we can't survive.
Right.
So therefore, and also according to some medical science, after birth, the next few weeks, simply mother's physical touch is the crucial factor for proper development of the brain. So that means, you see, this physical element needs someone's sort of affection. So our life starts like that way, till our death. The human compassion or human affection is a whole life, something very, very important. And key factor. Then like anger, aggressiveness, these also part of our life, but occasionally come, not dominant force. Dominant force is human affection. That's my view. What is your view?
Well, my view is that people are basically good to start with. The core is good, but it's a big but. Gets poured on there what you call negative thinking. We call it errors in thinking. So they get first as we start to misinterpret other people's behavior. And so that puts a negative layer around the positive. Then we get misconceptions. We hear that this other ethnic group are bad. 2,000 years ago, they invaded our country, so they're bad. So then that makes another layer. And then we start seeking for things to give us immediate pleasure rather than contentment. And so we get dissatisfied. That's another layer. Then we get angry at other people, of course, who have more than we have. So in the end, this core is covered up. What we can do in therapy is we get through we pierce the core. Now, and so I think we can be successful in doing treatment. And I would hope that there'd be some way of doing this on a very large scale. But perhaps the project that you propose will get taken up someday. And actually, public schools are trying to introduce subjects like you just described to help the students out. So education is the final answer.
Very good. So I'm very glad. In principle, I think elder scientist blessed about my view.
Thank you.
So very, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So therefore,
Now we're going to have
the
a question
media.
and answers. We're going to have a question period. Would you like to have a question period?
Oh yes. So the conclusion. The media also, I think, have great important role for promotion of these sort of the insight. Usually, you see all the negative things, murder or scandal or these things become news. Again, now these become news. Why? In human mind, murder, killing, bullying, or abuse, these are something shocking. So it becomes news. Then, on the other hand, millions of mothers taking care of their own child and milking taking milk of these things, that's not news. It's something normal, isn't it? So the kindness or the action of kindness, compassion, that we take for granted. nothing news. So something bad, killing, bullying, or raping, doesn't become news. So this also, I think, shows basically our nature. We love the gentleness or these positive things we take for granted. So in any way, the media people usually, you see, the more enthusiasm or report the more negative things, so that public sometimes, you see, having the feeling, oh, human nature is bad, our world is bad. I think it's important to make clear presentation, more balanced way. There are bad things, but there's always the hope, because of the basis of hope. Because it's just such a wonderful things also there. So equally, there are negative things, but equally counterforce also very much living. So the only thing is we must promote these positive things, then these negative things can reduce. Otherwise, you see, feeding in our mind, public mind, all the negative things, then sometimes lose hope.
Yeah.
I'm going to say a few words. It falls to me to sum up an extraordinary meeting. And the good news is that we had a meeting of minds. What kind of meeting was it? Well, at one level, it was the meeting of two great thinkers, and one thinker from the West and one thinker from the East. At another level, it was the meeting of a monk and a doctor. And the monks and doctors have different functions, but their minds can meet. At another level, I think what we have was the meeting of two human beings who have in common that they care more for other people than I think they even care for themselves. I think these are fantastic things. And what came from this meeting? Well, Mahatma Gandhi, who you mentioned, once answered a question. The question was, what did he think of Western civilization? And he said he thought it would be a good idea. And the issue that I think he referred to was the issue of values, of the fact that Western civilization sometimes, as you say, as you both have said, sometimes neglects values. At the same time, it's not possible, as you said yesterday, Your Holiness, that it's not possible to be concerned about moral ethics and values if you're starving, if you're hungry, and that's partly what Western society offers. So we need the development, and what we're seeing, I think, today in terms of the people here is the development of some questions about motivation, about the seeking for compassion, the motivation to reduce suffering. And that, I think, is one of the things that we're beginning to hear. It's one of the things that modern psychotherapy and analytical meditation have in common and are moving towards. And I think everyone here must welcome that. Everyone here, I think, also today will leave questioning their motivation, questioning how they can deal with suffering. Because in the end, there is an important I. What can I do? And that, I believe, you have both given us something, that you've given us. Tim, you're a scientist, and you're a monk. And science sometimes can be empty, and sometimes spirituality gives you no food. And I hope that what we're seeing is the emergence of not an empty science, of a science, a Buddhist science and a cognitive science, which will give us a lot of hope for the future. And finally, just to show what a difference one person can make, I'd just like to point out to you that Astrid Palm made today happen. And as a result of Astrid's motivation, which is about reducing suffering, about caring for other people, compassion, we have 1,400 people here who have come to hear two human beings meeting together in their minds. And I'd like to thank you all. Thank you.
That music? Some music?
We would like, all of us, to wish you a wonderful coming birthday with a song.
I think we know the words.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, your holiness. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Flowers. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Like fireflies. The lights.
Oh, yes. Okay. Oh. So thank you very much. Your, what's it, a beautiful expression to me, and I really enjoy this meeting. Of course, this morning we also spent some time with him, and really meaningful sort of discussion. And now here also is a very, very inspiration, great inspiration. Then large number of people here. This is showing your warm feeling towards us. And with this flower, I think it was me, occasion of, birthday. So as a Buddhist monk, I always feel early morning something like birthday, new birthday, isn't it? Morning, everything very fresh, everything something full of alertness about my mind. So that time, I usually is making sort of, shaping my mind. Rest of the day, I should utilize meaningful way. So I want to tell you the best sort of birthday gift. Please try to strengthen your warm-heartedness and be a compassionate person, so that not only you individual yourself becoming more happier person, but also your family, especially your children, will get maximum benefit. And through that way, I think we can change the atmosphere of our home, within the home, or within the community, within the society, within the national level, or global level. So I always believe every individual have some kind of ability making contribution for a better world. So all have, I think, same sort of opportunity. So please keep that right in your mind. And I also want to extend my share to each one. Each one have the birthday. So I would like to say happy birthday to all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.